What if I told you that the reason you're not improving in trading has nothing to do with your system, your edge, or your broker, but everything to do with the way you think about yourself? You've studied price action, you've read about risk management, maybe you even meditate, but your growth has plateaued. Why? Because you might be operating from a fixed mindset. In Carol Dweck's mindset, this foundational concept distinguishes between two mental operating systems: the fixed mindset, which believes abilities are static, and the growth mindset, which believes abilities can be developed. In trading, that difference can mean the line between burnout and breakthrough. You enter a trade, it hits your stop. Your brain doesn't just register a loss, it registers a statement about you. I suck at this. Why did I even think I could trade? That's fixed mindset language. It personalizes outcomes. It treats every trade as a judgment. On the other hand, the growth mindset interprets the same loss as data. Okay, what did I miss? Was the thesis valid but the timing off? You've probably already experienced this without realizing it. You backtested a strategy, it failed. You blamed the market or yourself. But what if the real reason was your mindset lens? Traders with a fixed mindset aim to prove themselves. Every trade is a test of identity. That creates immense pressure and emotional volatility. You avoid certain setups, not because they're bad, but because you're afraid they'll make you look bad. Now, here's the kicker: the market doesn't care. It doesn't reward ego. It doesn't punish doubt. It simply responds. So your mindset becomes your filter. If you believe mistakes expose your lack of talent, you'll avoid learning opportunities. If you believe mistakes are stepping stones, you'll lean into them. This is why traders burn out, not because the game is too hard, but because their identity can't take the hits. Dweck writes, in the fixed mindset, failure is not a mere event, it is a trauma. That quote should haunt you, because it shows how dangerous it is to equate performance with worth. And yet most traders do just that. You win, you feel like a genius. You lose, you're worthless. This volatility of self-perception is exhausting. The growth mindset breaks that cycle. It separates the self from the outcome. It allows you to say, I'm learning, rather than I'm losing. But don't mistake the growth mindset for naivety. It's not about pretending losses don't hurt. It's about processing them through a lens that fuels resilience. And that's critical in trading, where drawdowns, uncertainty, and randomness are baked into the process. A fixed mindset will keep you chasing perfection. A growth mindset will keep you refining execution. One is a trap. The other is a path. So the question isn't, am I a good trader? The question is, am I growing as a trader? That one shift can change your entire trajectory, because the moment you stop trying to prove something and start trying to improve something, you become unstoppable. You've been praised for being smart, maybe even talented. You picked up chart patterns quickly. People admired how fast you learned indicators. But now you're stuck, paralyzed before hitting buy. Why? Because being smart has become your identity. And your fear isn't losing capital, it's losing face. Carol Dweck warns us that when identity is built on outcomes, every setback becomes an existential crisis. In trading, this is deadly. You begin to conflate being a good trader with being a winner. And suddenly, the moment you lose, you don't just doubt your system, you doubt your worth. You hesitate, overthink, refuse to cut a loser, or worse, refuse to admit you're wrong. This is the trader's identity crisis. You became a trader to master the markets, but somewhere along the way, your ego hijacked the mission. Now, every red trade chips away at your self-esteem. That's not trading. That's self-destruction in slow motion. And Dweck's work illuminates why. The fixed mindset attaches value to being flawless. A trader with this mindset will avoid uncomfortable truths, sidestep anything that could expose weakness, and interpret all feedback as a threat. You end up building a prison of perfectionism. The bars? Your need to always be right. Contrast that with the growth mindset. Here, identity isn't rooted in success, it's rooted in effort, learning, and adaptation. You stop trying to be impressive and start trying to be effective. And ironically, that's what makes you impressive. Think of Mike Bellafiore's traders at SMB Capital. What separates the ones who make it? Not just talent. It's how they respond to being wrong. Losing trades don't trigger identity crises, they trigger curiosity. In this light, failure becomes feedback. You grow. Dweck calls this a different operating system. In a growth mindset, you're no longer driven by fear of inadequacy. You're fueled by the desire to understand. And that shift, when internalized, dissolves ego. You stop needing the market to validate you. You stop needing your P&L to prove your intelligence. Instead, you focus on process, self-awareness, and execution. Ask yourself, are you trading to prove you're smart or to become wise? One anchors you to fragile pride. The other liberates you to evolve. And evolution is what separates the hobbyist from the professional. So when you freeze before clicking buy, examine the story running in your head. Is it about performance or identity? Because if you're trying to protect your ego, you'll sacrifice growth. But if you're willing to look dumb today, you might just become brilliant tomorrow. Dweck writes, why waste time proving over and over how great you are when you could be getting better? In trading, getting better isn't optional, it's survival. You can't fake it here. The market exposes you, and that's a gift. It gives you a mirror. The question is, will you look, or will you keep hiding behind the illusion of being right? This isn't about humility for its own sake. It's about self-liberation. When your identity is no longer chained to wins or losses, you unlock your true potential. You start asking better questions. You start journaling not to brag, but to discover. You start seeing losses as part of the terrain, not personal insults. That's the mindset of a professional. That's the mindset of someone who lasts. So break the illusion. Your worth was never in the green candles. It's in your resilience, your willingness to adapt, your decision to learn, especially when it hurts, especially when you'd rather quit. Because every time you shed the need to be perfect, you take one more step toward mastery. You lost again, and this time it stings more than it should. Not because of the money, but because you thought you had it figured out. You followed your setup, waited patiently, and still the market went the other way. Now you're frustrated, questioning not just the trade, but your ability. Why do I keep messing this up? Maybe I'm not cut out for this. That voice in your head, that's the fixed mindset talking. Carol Dweck reveals something most traders never realize. The way you interpret failure dictates whether you stagnate or grow. And in trading, how you respond to losses is more important than how you celebrate wins. Traders with a fixed mindset treat every loss as evidence that they're not good enough. It's personal, it's emotional, it's corrosive. You beat yourself up after a bad trade not because you care about the money, but because you're desperate to maintain an image of being capable. That desperation blinds you. Instead of reviewing the trade objectively, you spiral. Instead of refining your edge, you abandon it. The result? You lose not just capital, but confidence. And this is exactly what Dweck warns against. When you fear failure, you avoid risk. When you avoid risk, you avoid growth. But here's the shift. What if loss wasn't a threat, but fuel? What if setbacks were part of the process, not signs that you're broken? A growth mindset views losses as information. If a trade failed, that's feedback, something to investigate, not something to regret. It doesn't mean you're incompetent. It means there's a variable you didn't consider or a lesson you haven't learned yet. That single shift transforms your relationship with the market. Instead of fearing losses, you start studying them. Instead of hiding from your mistakes, you document them. Jared Tendler, author of The Mental Game of Trading, echoes this idea. Emotion distorts perception, but structure restores it. And mindset determines whether you even seek that structure in the first place. Think of it this way. Your brain is pattern seeking. It wants to find meaning in every trade. But if your mindset filters those patterns through shame and self-judgment, you never reach clarity. Growth happens when you detach identity from outcome. Dweck emphasizes that effort is not the opposite of intelligence. It's the path to it. In trading, this means viewing the grind of journaling, post-market reviews, and self-auditing not as chores, but as acts of mastery. Each red trade is a data point, a gift, a mirror. If you let it be, you're not just trying to win more. You're trying to become someone who learns faster, adapts better, and sticks to process under pressure. That means welcoming discomfort. It means saying, yes, this trade failed. Let me understand why. Instead of, I failed. What's wrong with me? This isn't just semantics, it's survival. Every blown account, every rage quit, every slow spiral into doubt, it starts with a mindset that treats failure as identity. But when you flip that script, when you begin to say, this was a mistake, not a definition, you take your power back. You turn loss into leverage. This is the crucible every real trader passes through. The moment when you decide whether to crumble under pressure or reshape yourself through it. And Dweck's work gives you the blueprint. Don't ask, how do I stop losing? Ask, how do I keep learning? Because in trading, losing is inevitable. What isn't inevitable is how you interpret it. That's your edge. That's your leverage. That's the part of the game only you control. And when you master that, the game changes. You've probably told yourself at some point, I'm just not naturally disciplined, or she's just better at this than me. Maybe you've watched another trader hit consistent wins and assumed they had a gift. But that belief, that success is born, not built, is the foundation of a fixed mindset. Carol Dweck dismantles this illusion with precision. In her research, what separated high performers from everyone else wasn't talent, it was their relationship with effort. In the fixed mindset, effort is a signal of weakness. If you're really good, the thinking goes, you shouldn't need to try that hard. Sound familiar? In trading, this shows up in subtle but deadly ways. You try a new strategy. It doesn't click immediately, so you drop it. You journal for a week, then stop because it doesn't feel natural. You blame your inconsistency on personality traits, like laziness or impulsiveness, instead of seeing discipline as a skill. But here's what Dweck proves. Effort is not what you resort to when you fail. It's what you apply when you're serious about growth. Traders who succeed long-term aren't superhuman. They're just people who decided to get obsessed with the process, not the result, not the P&L, the process. You've heard Mark Douglas say trading is all probabilities. But what does that mean if not an invitation to master repetition, to drill the edge over and over without needing reward each time? The growth mindset takes this to heart. It welcomes effort. It understands that discipline, patience, and execution are not optional. They are the edge. And the beauty is, you don't need to be born with them. You train them, you build them, you wire them into your nervous system. Dweck tells the story of students praised for their intelligence versus those praised for their effort. The latter group pushed harder, took more risks, and improved more. Why? Because they weren't protecting a fragile identity. They were expanding their capacity. Apply that to trading. If you believe effort is a sign you're not talented, then every struggle becomes a crisis. But if you believe effort is the price of excellence, every moment of grind becomes part of your evolution. You stop seeing discipline as punishment and start seeing it as power. Let me ask you, do you avoid doing the work because deep down you think it shouldn't be this hard? That's the fixed mindset whispering to you. It tells you that struggle means you're not good enough. But what if struggle means you're on the right track? That friction you feel when building your trading routine, that resistance to logging every execution, that fatigue after hours of chart review, those aren't signs to stop. They're signals that you're growing. The more you embrace them, the more resilient you become. Steve Jobs once said, I'm convinced that about half of what separates successful entrepreneurs from the non-successful ones is pure perseverance. Translate that to trading. The real edge might not be your system. It's your stubborn refusal to quit on process. So when you feel tempted to skip prep, to avoid the boring repetition, to trust your gut instead of journaling, pause. Ask yourself, am I making this decision because I believe talent should come easy or because I know mastery is earned? Dweck's message is clear. Effort is not extra. It's essential. And in a field where randomness reigns, effort is your anchor. It keeps you grounded when wins and losses blur. It keeps you sharp when emotion flares. And most of all, it keeps you honest, because the work never lies. So don't envy the trader who seems gifted. Envy the one who shows up every day, logs their trades, audits their thoughts, and reviews their mistakes with curiosity. not shame. That trader isn't lucky. They're free. Free from the illusion of talent, free from the trap of ego, and free to grow into a level of skill that most never reach. Not because they couldn't, but because they wouldn't do the work. You don't avoid feedback because you don't want to grow. You avoid it because deep down, it threatens the identity you've worked so hard to build. Every time you close a losing trade, you have a chance to learn something. But do you actually take it? Or do you shrug it off, blame the market, and scroll through Twitter for dopamine? Be honest. Feedback in trading is brutal. It doesn't come in the form of applause or mentorship. It comes in the form of red trades, missed entries, and impulsive exits. It's impersonal, raw, and unforgiving. That's why most traders run from it. But Carol Dweck explains exactly what separates those who grow from those who stagnate. The growth-minded individual actively seeks feedback, even when it stings, especially when it stings, because that pain, it's a compass. It's pointing to something you haven't mastered yet. And if you keep ignoring it, you'll keep repeating the same cycles. This is where most traders fall into a blind spot. They think they're being analytical, but they're just being defensive. They protect their ego instead of examining the data. How many times have you said, it was just a bad day, when it was actually a series of undisciplined actions? How often do you audit your losers versus your winners? The hard truth is, feedback feels like failure when you're trapped in a fixed mindset. But in a growth mindset, feedback is fuel. Think about elite athletes. The reason they evolve so fast is because they're surrounded by coaches who break down every move, every mistake, every micro adjustment. They crave feedback because they've learned to detach it from identity. You need to adopt that same stance in trading. Stop treating trade reviews like courtroom trials. This isn't about whether you were right or wrong. It's about whether you learned. Because the market doesn't care about your opinions, it only responds to your actions. And your job is to respond to its feedback, not resist it. In fact, the better you get at welcoming feedback, the faster you grow. The quicker your emotional recovery time, the more accurate your adjustments, and ultimately, the more sustainable your profitability. But to get there, you need to shift how you see critique. It's not an attack, it's an opportunity. Dweck describes how fixed mindset individuals avoid feedback to protect their self-esteem. Meanwhile, growth-oriented individuals seek it as a shortcut to progress. In trading, this shows up in every journaling session you skip, every error you excuse, every blind spot you leave unexamined. You must start thinking like a craftsman. If your edge is your tool, then feedback is the sharpening stone. Use it. Sharpen every week. Audit every emotional decision. Don't hide from the data. Embrace it. Even feedback from others, like your trading coach, Discord group, or prop firm mentor, it only stings when your ego is in the way. When you remove ego from the equation, even harsh truth becomes clarity. And clarity is priceless. You'll stop confusing being wrong with being worthless. You'll start using every loss as leverage. You'll stop filtering feedback through shame and start filtering it through strategy. And that's when things accelerate. That's when you begin compounding growth. Dweck says, the view you adopt for yourself profoundly affects the way you lead your life. In trading terms, if you adopt the view that feedback is toxic, you'll subconsciously dodge it for years. But if you adopt the view that feedback is essential, you'll grow faster in 6 months than most do in 6 years. You'll seek out tough reviews. You'll ask better questions. You'll spot patterns not just in price, but in yourself. And that meta-awareness, that's what makes a real trader. Not just someone who places trades, but someone who learns from them. So the next time you feel that burn of critique, pause. Don't run from it. Write it down. Sit with it. Ask yourself, what is this trying to teach me? Then take action. Adjust the process. Refine the execution. Tighten the loop. Because feedback is never your enemy. Avoiding it is. And the moment you welcome feedback with open arms, not as judgment, but as data, you graduate to a new level of mental discipline, one where growth is not a possibility. It's inevitable. You're having a solid day. You've followed your plan, taken 2 trades, stuck to your stop loss, and logged your execution. Then something small happens, a news candle you didn't expect, a trade you missed by one tick, or a sudden loss that wasn't part of the script. And just like that, everything flips. You feel yourself tighten. You breathe shallower. Your next trade, you size up impulsively. You chase. You deviate. And you tell yourself, I don't know what came over me. But the truth is, you do. You were triggered. Carol Dweck's work on mindset explains this exact moment. Not just the theory, but the biology behind it. When the fixed mindset gets triggered, it hijacks your mental state. You're no longer executing from logic. You're trying to protect your identity. This is the trap most traders never even know they're in. You think you're responding to the market, but really, you're responding to the story you've attached to what just happened. Maybe it's the belief that you should have caught that move, or that if you lose again, you're proving your critics right, or that one red trade means you're a failure. These thoughts aren't trading mistakes, they're mindset intrusions. They quietly pull you out of flow and into fear. Dweck teaches that the fixed mindset is incredibly reactive to judgment. It needs to prove itself constantly. And when challenged, by a loss, by randomness, by imperfection, it goes into overdrive. You try to regain control not by resetting, but by forcing the outcome. That's why you revenge trade. That's why you break rules. That's why you sabotage your own edge. And the scariest part? You often don't realize it until it's too late. But once you learn to recognize the trigger, you regain power. You begin to interrupt the cascade before it hits your P&L. That starts with awareness. Real-time, in-the-moment awareness of when your mindset is shifting from growth to fixed. Not after the trade, not in your journal, in the moment. You need to learn what your personal mindset triggers are. Maybe it's when a friend brags about their gains. Maybe it's after a losing streak. Maybe it's when you hesitate and then watch a trade take off without you. These aren't just emotional blips, they're psychological landmines. And if you don't map them, they will control you. Dweck's research reveals that the growth mindset isn't a permanent state. It's a muscle. And like any muscle, it fatigues under stress. The more you're exposed to risk, volatility, and uncertainty, the easier it is for that fixed voice to sneak in. You're blowing it. You're not cut out for this. You better make this one count. And boom, you're no longer trading. You're trying to redeem your ego. So what do? You train interruption. You create systems that help you identify and de-escalate triggers in real time. Maybe it's a 1-minute reset before each trade. Maybe it's a mantra you repeat. I don't need this trade to work. I need to work the trade. Maybe it's a checklist that forces you to label your emotional state before entry. These aren't fluff. These are your mental risk controls. And they matter more than your indicators. Because no edge survives a hijacked mindset. Dweck explains that when you reframe these moments as opportunities to build your growth mindset, you rewire your relationship with stress. Stress no longer means danger. It means training ground. You stop seeing triggers as enemies and start seeing them as invitations. Every time you catch yourself mid-trigger and choose process over panic, you grow. You solidify a new identity, not just as someone who trades, but as someone who manages themselves under pressure. That is rare, that is powerful, and that is exactly what separates consistent traders from chaotic ones. Look at the traders who last, the ones who grow year after year. It's not because they never tilt. It's because they know when they're about to, and they intervene. They treat their mind like part of the system. They review emotional setups just like they review technical ones. They study themselves because they know the mind is the first market. Dweck's findings on neuroplasticity confirm this. Your reactions are not fixed. Your self-talk is not destiny. Your impulses can be reshaped, but only if you recognize when the shift is happening. Only if you catch yourself in the act, not just after it. That's the art of mindset management. Not just journaling what went wrong, but noticing what's going wrong in real time and shifting gears. So the next time you feel the grip in your chest, the heat in your face, the story forming in your head, pause. That's the signal. That's your edge knocking. Ask yourself, is this the voice of growth, or is this the fixed voice trying to protect itself? Then act accordingly. Step back, reset, recenter, trade again, but only from the place where identity isn't at stake. Because the moment you stop trading to prove and start trading to improve, you neutralize the trigger. And that's when your trading and your mindset begin to truly evolve. You can't control what the market will do next, but you can absolutely control the story you tell yourself when it does. That story, the inner dialogue that loops through your mind in the heat of uncertainty, is the difference between a meltdown and a breakthrough. And if you've ever sat frozen in front of your screen, watching a drawdown unfold while your palms sweat and your logic evaporates, then you already know how powerful your emotional responses can be. Carol Dweck's research offers something most traders desperately need but rarely seek: a framework for transforming emotional chaos into psychological resilience. The growth mindset doesn't just apply to performance, it directly reshapes how you process failure, disappointment, and stress. The truth is, your brain is not hardwired for trading, it's hardwired for survival. When the market turns against you, it activates your limbic system, flooding you with cortisol, narrowing your focus, and screaming at you to fix it now. This is where most traders implode, not because they don't know what to do, but because they haven't trained their mind to stay grounded when everything feels like it's falling apart. But here's where mindset becomes your greatest leverage. With enough self-awareness, you can begin to reframe these moments, not as threats, but as signals. Emotional spikes are not failures, they're invitations to intervene. You get to decide what the next thought will be. Dweck's insights reveal that your self-talk in moments of pressure literally shapes your future performance. A fixed mindset says, "I can't believe I messed this up again," while a growth mindset says, "This feels hard. What am I being asked to learn right now?" That one shift in language creates space. And in trading, space is everything. Space gives you the power to pause instead of react, to reassess instead of spiral, to stick to your edge instead of chasing validation. You might not be able to stop fear from rising, but you can stop it from steering the ship. And the way you do that is by building a habit of reframing. Reframing isn't about toxic positivity. It's about realistic mental flexibility. When your plan fails, you don't lie to yourself and say it was perfect. You examine the data, detach from the ego sting, and ask, what did I learn about myself? That's emotional maturity. That's how you rewire the pattern. And yes, it's work, but it's not guesswork. Dweck shows us that the more you practice this kind of inner dialogue, the stronger those neural pathways become. Over time, your default response to difficulty becomes curiosity, not self-destruction. And that's a game changer. You stop blaming the market for your reactions. You stop blaming yourself for not being emotionless. And you start accepting that emotional intensity is part of the path, not proof that you're failing. Let me be clear. Traders who succeed don't eliminate emotion. They integrate it. They know exactly what fear feels like, and they've learned how to sit with it, breathe through it, and redirect it toward process. This is why mindfulness, journaling, and mental rehearsal aren't extras. They're part of your edge. When you journal your emotional reactions, not just your trades, you create a feedback loop that strengthens the growth mindset. You start seeing patterns in your behavior the same way you see patterns on the chart. You begin to notice that every tilt has a root cause. Every hesitation has a hidden belief, and every meltdown is a signal you've ignored for too long. Dweck's concept of yet is powerful here. You didn't fail. You haven't succeeded yet. You didn't lose control. You haven't mastered that moment yet. That word rewires shame into strategy. It puts you back in the driver's seat. And when you train your internal dialogue to include yet, you start showing up differently. You take red trades in stride. You bounce back faster. You move from frustration to fascination. And that mindset isn't just helpful. It's essential for survival in a game where no outcome is guaranteed, and the only constant, you are not a robot. And you don't need to be. What you need is a version of yourself who can feel deeply and still choose discipline, who can stumble and still return to process, who can hear the inner critic and still take the next best action. That is the true power of mindset. It's not about eliminating struggle. It's about rewriting the meaning of struggles so it becomes a teacher instead of a tyrant. Every emotional response in trading is a doorway. Behind it is a lesson. Behind that lesson is strength. And behind that strength is the version of you that you've been trying to become. So the next time you're deep in a drawdown, your hands shaking, your mind racing, pause. Listen. What is your inner voice saying? If it's the voice of judgment, reframe it. If it's the voice of panic, soften it. If it's the voice of shame, challenge it. Say, this is hard and I am capable. Say, this is pain and I can learn through it. Say, this is not the end, this is the middle, and act accordingly. Because every time you do that, you're not just managing a trade, you're building a mindset that can outlast any market condition. That's your true edge, and no one can take it from you. You're not trying to be a trading god. You're trying to be a trading professional. There's a massive difference, and your mindset determines which path you're really on. The fixed mindset whispers that your job is to impress, to win, to never look foolish. It wants you to be perfect. The growth mindset whispers something else entirely. Your job is to improve, adapt, and show up, especially when no one's watching. Carol Dweck's work reveals that your identity, the story you carry about who you are, either traps you in fear or frees you to evolve. And for traders, this is a life or death distinction. If your identity is built on being the person who gets it right, then every trade becomes a test of your worth. That's why one red candle derails your day. That's why you hesitate to enter setups after a losing streak. You're not protecting capital. You're protecting an ego that can't handle looking like a beginner. But real professionals, they've outgrown that narrative. They've traded the desire to be impressive for the discipline to be consistent. They're not afraid to say, I don't know. They don't pretend. They investigate. They journal their flaws like scientists, not like victims. They detach from praise and blame. Their identity isn't built on wins. It's built on process. Dweck calls this the power of self-concept. Who you believe you are dictates how you behave. If you believe you're a natural-born talent, you'll shy away from uncomfortable setups, you'll avoid volatility, and you'll filter all decisions through the fear of looking wrong. But if you believe you're a work in progress, you'll welcome challenge, you'll endure drawdowns with composure, and you'll seek out pressure, not as punishment, but as practice. And that shift doesn't happen by accident. You have to construct the identity of a growth-minded trader with intention. That means redefining what success looks like to you. Is success just a green day? Or is success following your rules, even when they don't lead to profit? Is success being admired? Or is success being accountable to yourself in silence? The market will tempt you to build an identity around outcomes. It will reward you randomly, punish you unfairly, and seduce you into tying your self-worth to numbers that fluctuate by the tick. If you fall for that trap, you'll ride the roller coaster of ego. You'll overtrade after wins. You'll underperform after losses. You'll abandon setups to chase validation. But when your identity is rooted in growth, none of that sways you. Because you know who you are. You are someone who shows up, who studies, who adjusts, who doesn't fake confidence, but builds it through action. This kind of identity is anti-fragile. It absorbs losses and turns them into leverage. It thrives under stress. It's the identity of someone who doesn't need to win every day, just needs to improve every week. And here's what's wild. This shift doesn't just change your psychology, it changes your results. When you stop trading to defend your identity, you start executing with freedom. You cut losses faster. You hold winners longer. You let go of the need to be right. And that's what allows you to actually trade right. You stop hiding. You stop lying to yourself in journals. You stop fudging stats in your backtests. You face the truth. Because the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, is the only thing that sets you free. Dweck notes that students with a growth mindset didn't just improve, they began to crave feedback. They sought out failure as a way to sharpen their skills. Imagine being that way with trading. Imagine looking forward to post-trade reviews not because you're perfect, but because you're evolving. Imagine greeting a losing trade with the phrase, "Let's study this," instead of, "I'm such an idiot." That's not just mindset, that's mastery in motion. You say you have a system, but does your mindset actually align with it? Because you can build the best trading strategy in the world, but if your internal framework is rigid, fragile, or ego driven, you'll sabotage every potential edge before it matures. Carol Dweck's concept of fixed and growth mindsets doesn't just apply to personal development. It applies directly to how you build, refine, and stick to your trading system. A fixed mindset will trick you into believing your strategy must always work, that a drawdown invalidates the system, or worse, that optimizing it is a sign of weakness. But a growth mindset understands the truth. Your system is a living thing. It must be tested, stretched, iterated, and adapted, just like you. Think about it. When was the last time you made a tweak to your plan because of genuine insight, not emotion? When was the last time you journaled a losing streak and used that data to ask deeper questions instead of blaming volatility or bad luck? This is where most traders get stuck. They treat their system like a fragile sculpture, afraid that modifying it will ruin everything. But in reality, that fear is mindset based. Dweck's research shows that when people fear failure, they cling to what's familiar, even if it no longer serves them. In trading, this shows up as refusing to evolve your risk parameters, avoiding new market conditions, or sticking to setups that stopped working months ago. Your system is only as strong as the mindset behind it. And if your mindset fears change, you'll stay stuck in an outdated process, not because the system doesn't work, but because you don't work on it. A growth-minded trader, on the other hand, treats their strategy like a hypothesis. Each trade is an experiment. Each result is data. They don't over-celebrate wins or panic over losses. They look at sequences, distributions, sample sizes. They use statistics to guide refinement, not emotion. And most importantly, they separate self from system. If a setup fails, they don't say, "I failed." They say, "That variable didn't hold up. Let's investigate." This is how you build a system that evolves with you. Because let's be real, market regimes change. Volatility cycles expand and contract. What worked in a trending bull market won't work in a range-bound chop. If your mindset is fixed, you'll take every inconsistency personally. You'll start doubting your worth instead of your data. But if your mindset is growth-oriented, you'll expect these shifts. You'll anticipate them. And you'll prepare contingency plans, not from a place of fear, but from professional maturity. One of the most overlooked areas where mindset creeps into system design is risk management. A trader with a fixed mindset often avoids cutting size, avoids tighter stops, or refuses to lower expectations, even when the environment demands it. Why? Because to adjust those variables feels like admitting weakness. But a growth mindset reframes that adjustment as intelligence. As Dweck puts it, becoming is better than being. Your system is a reflection of your willingness to become better, not just to be right. This also applies to backtesting and journaling. If you journal to feel good, you'll only record the clean trades. But if you journal to learn, you'll embrace the messy ones. You'll highlight your mistakes. You'll annotate not just what you did, but how you felt. And those emotional footprints, that's where the real insight lives. Every backtest you've done, every log you've kept, every post-analysis you've avoided or committed to, those actions mirror your mindset. Because a fixed mindset fears scrutiny. It fears being wrong. So it avoids metrics. It avoids clarity. It lives in vague excuses. But a growth mindset, it seeks exposure. It hunts for blind spots. It creates processes that surface mistakes early before they become costly habits. Your system is only as powerful as your ability to confront truth. And truth doesn't care how long you've been trading, how big your wins are, or how impressive your drawdowns look on a forum. Truth shows up in the data, and data only helps if your mindset is ready to receive it. So ask yourself, is your current trading system designed to protect your ego or to serve your evolution? Are your rules rigid out of discipline or fear? Are you optimizing from insight or reacting out of insecurity? Dweck's work challenges you to rewire how you think about progress. In trading, that means making your system a reflection of growth, not perfection. It means building feedback loops into your process. It means developing rituals that reinforce learning, not just habits that protect pride. Think of your system as a conversation between your past self, your present self, and your future self. Your past collected the data. Your present applies it. Your future depends on whether you learned anything. And mindset is the translator. So build your system not just to work, but to teach you. Build it to evolve with you. Build it to reflect who you're becoming, not who you're trying to prove yourself to be. Because in the end, the traders who last are not the ones with the fanciest indicators. They're the ones who made their mind the core of their system and use that to adapt faster, grow deeper, and perform longer than everyone else. You're not trying to win this week. You're trying to win the decade. But you won't make it unless your mindset evolves as fast as the markets do. That's the long game, and most traders aren't playing it. They're chasing the rush, sprinting from setup to setup, mistaking short-term performance for long-term growth. Carol Dweck's work exposes exactly why this approach fails. A fixed mindset is obsessed with immediate validation. It needs fast wins to feel secure, fast feedback to feel worthy, and fast results to feel successful. But trading doesn't care how fast you want to win. It only cares how well you adapt. And adaptation isn't a one-time shift. It's a lifelong pattern. Long-term mindset evolution means you're no longer measuring your progress by your most recent P&L. You're measuring it by how you respond when things break down, when plans fail, when the environment shifts. That's the essence of sustainability. Traders who stay in the game long enough to succeed don't do it by avoiding pain. They do it by transforming it. They learn to see every season, bull runs, sideways slogs, brutal corrections, not as interruptions, but as training grounds. Dweck's research confirms this. People who thrive over time see challenge not as a deviation from the path, but as the path. They don't get discouraged by plateaus. They investigate them. They don't panic when they're behind. They strategize. The same has to apply to you. If your identity is still tied to fast growth, you'll quit when it slows. If you're still chasing the dopamine of a green streak, you'll fold the moment the market gets cold. But if your mindset is anchored in evolution, every trade becomes part of the fabric. Every setback is stitched into your skill set. The long game is about turning your trading career into a journey of self-mastery. That includes your mindset, your emotional endurance, your intellectual humility, and your spiritual grit. Because let's be real, trading will test all of it. There will be years where nothing works. There will be months of doubt, weeks where your edge feels dull, and days when you seriously consider quitting. If your mindset is built on quick wins, those moments will break you. But if your mindset is forged through commitment to growth, they'll refine you. You'll come back sharper, deeper, more intentional. That's the edge no chart can show you. Long-term success is built on what you choose to believe when no one's clapping. When your trading isn't sexy, when your process feels repetitive, when no one's watching and the only reward is integrity. And yet, this is exactly where professional identity is built. Not in the peaks, but in the plateaus. Not in the rush, but in the ritual. Not in the bragging rights, but in the invisible reps. Dweck says, becoming is better than being. In trading, that means embracing the mindset of the student over the status of the expert. The moment you think you've figured it out is the moment you stop growing. And if you're not growing, you're falling behind, because the market evolves daily. So how do you evolve with it? You build systems that support mindset development just as seriously as you build trade setups. You commit to post-trade journaling not as punishment, but as pattern recognition. You reframe drawdowns not as evidence of failure, but as invitations to review your process. And most importantly, you detach from the need to arrive. There is no finish line. There's just the next level of awareness, the next layer of refinement, the next breakthrough that only comes after a breakdown. This mindset doesn't just create better traders. It creates better humans, people who are resilient under pressure, humble in success and graceful in defeat. People who don't fear uncertainty because they trust their ability to respond. And that trust, it doesn't come from affirmations. It comes from action. Repeated, consistent, imperfect action. The kind that builds a feedback loop between your identity and your behavior. The kind that reinforces day after day that you are someone who grows, someone who doesn't quit when it's hard, someone who doesn't hide from mistakes, someone who shows up anyway. This is the long game. And if you want to play it well, you need to start thinking like an evolutionary trader, not a reactionary one. Every choice you make today is a brick in the foundation of who you'll be 5 years from now. The systems you build, the habits you reinforce, the mindset you feed, all of it is shaping your trajectory. So don't just ask, how do I win this week? Ask, how do I become the kind of person who wins repeatedly, sustainably, and with integrity? Because that person, the one who evolves, will still be here when the hype dies down, when the bull runs cool, when the influencers vanish. That person is you, if you choose it. If you commit to the mindset that welcomes growth, forgives mistakes, and demands truth. So play the long game. Trade the mindset first. Let the rest follow.